You're not stuck. You're just trying too hard. That's the part no one tells you. Because effort sounds like the answer. Discipline sounds like the solution. Control feels responsible. It feels like you're doing something right. Like you're staying ahead. Like you're protecting your future. But the more you try to control everything, the heavier everything becomes. At first, it's subtle. You plan carefully. You think things through. You anticipate outcomes. You try to avoid mistakes before they happen. And it feels productive. It feels like you're being intentional. Like you're doing what successful people do. But slowly, something shifts. That intention tightens. You start replaying conversations in your head. You revisit decisions that were already made. You adjust small details that never needed adjusting. You tell yourself, maybe if I tweak this one thing, everything will finally click. And here's the strange part. The harder you try to fix it, the more complicated everything becomes. What used to feel simple now feels layered with pressure. You're no longer acting. You're calculating. You're no longer moving forward. You're trying to control every possible outcome before it even happens. And that changes everything. Because life doesn't open up under pressure. It resists it. This is where most people get it wrong. Effort isn't the problem. Discipline isn't the problem. The problem is when effort turns into control. Effort stays grounded. It focuses on what you can do right now. Control reaches beyond that. It tries to manage outcomes that haven't happened yet. It tries to predict reactions, secure certainty, eliminate risk. And in doing that, it pulls you away from the present moment. You stop being fully present with your actions because your mind is already somewhere else, trying to guarantee a future that isn't yours to guarantee. That's where the tension comes from. Not from doing too much, but from trying to hold on to something that was never yours to hold. And over time, this starts to drain everything. Even progress doesn't feel satisfying anymore. You achieve something, but your mind immediately moves to the next concern. Is it enough? Is it fast enough? What if it doesn't lead where it's supposed to? That constant evaluation strips the meaning out of what you're doing. Growth turns into pressure. Effort turns into obligation. And slowly, everything starts to feel heavier than it actually is. There's a quiet truth in this. The more you try to control every variable, the less clarity you have. Your attention becomes scattered. Your decisions become reactive. You start second-guessing instincts that were once clear. Not because they were wrong, but because you've layered too many expectations on top of them. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. And yet the instinct remains the same. Grip harder. Think more. Control everything. But that instinct is exactly what creates the problem. That's why feeling stuck isn't always about a lack of movement. Sometimes, it's the opposite. It's too much internal interference. You're moving, but not cleanly. You're acting, but not freely. There's always that extra layer of pressure shaping every decision, every thought, every step forward. And that pressure disconnects you from the natural rhythm of progress. Because real progress isn't just action. It's alignment. It's being fully present with what you're doing, without constantly trying to force it into a specific outcome. And underneath all of this, there's usually a belief driving it. A quiet one, but powerful. The belief that if you don't control things, they'll fall apart. That if you relax, you'll lose your chance. That everything depends on how tightly you manage it. But that belief doesn't come from clarity. It comes from fear. It assumes your power lies in controlling outcomes. When in reality, your power lies in how you show up to the process itself. And the moment you lose sight of that, control becomes a substitute for trust. And that's when everything starts to feel overwhelming. Because trust is exactly what's missing. When you start to see this clearly, something begins to shift. Not all at once, but gradually. You start noticing how much of your stress doesn't come from what you're doing, but from what you're trying to control beyond that. You begin to see the difference between acting with intention and acting with pressure. And that awareness creates space. Space to step back. Space to breathe. Space to return to a way of moving that feels grounded instead of forced. Because here's the truth most people never realize. Nothing you're chasing responds well to tension. But it responds very differently to clarity. There's a moment where things start to feel heavier than they should. And it doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from holding on to too much that was never yours to carry. You think about outcomes. You replay timelines in your head. You imagine how things should unfold, and when. And you tell yourself this is responsibility. This is what it takes to succeed. But slowly, the weight builds. Not because life is asking more from you, but because you're trying to manage things that don't belong to your control. And that's where everything starts to feel unstable. Even when nothing around you has actually changed. If you step back and look closely, there are only a few things that truly belong to you. Your actions, your effort, your discipline, your consistency. Those are stable. Those are always available. But then there are other things. How people respond. When opportunities appear. How outcomes unfold. And those things are influenced by variables you will never fully see or control. And yet, those are the exact things the mind clings to the most. It tries to predict them, shape them, secure them in advance. And when it can't, it creates tension. That tension often disguises itself as care. It feels like you're just invested. Like you're being serious. But there's a difference between caring about something and attaching your stability to it. The moment your emotional state depends on an outcome, you lose stability. Because now your peace rises and falls with things you can't control. You feel good when things align. You feel unsettled when they don't. And since those things are unpredictable, your internal state becomes unpredictable too. That's where anxiety begins. Not because the goal is wrong, but because you're holding onto it too tightly. There's an invisible pressure that builds when your mind says, "This has to work. This has to happen now. This needs to go exactly as planned." But that pressure doesn't make you more effective. It narrows your thinking. It makes you reactive. And over time, it drains your energy in a way that's hard to explain. Because it's not physical. It's internal. And the more you try to fix that feeling with more control, the worse it gets. Because you're feeding the very thing that created it. The mind wants certainty. It wants to know what's coming. It wants guarantees. And when it doesn't have them, it creates them. Through expectations. Through imagined scenarios. Through assumptions. But those don't create stability. They create attachment. And attachment to things outside your control is a constant source of tension. This is where everything changes. Not by doing more, but by seeing clearly. There are things you can control. And there are things you can't. And the moment you stop mixing the two, a huge amount of pressure disappears. You don't stop caring. You don't stop trying. You simply redirect your focus. Back to what's actually yours. Back to the present moment. Back to your actions. And when you do that, something subtle but powerful happens. You still move forward. But it feels different. There's less urgency. Less strain. You're no longer trying to force a result into existence. You're focusing on doing your part, as clearly as possible. And when the outcome finally comes, whatever it is, it doesn't shake you the same way. Because your stability was never tied to it. It was rooted in something far more reliable. Your ability to act with clarity, regardless of what happens. And you start to notice this shift in small moments. In conversations. In decisions. In how you carry yourself. You see it in people too. Someone walks into a conversation trying to say everything perfectly. Trying not to mess up. Trying to control how they're perceived. And there's tension. You can feel it. Even if nothing is said out loud. And then someone else walks in. Calm. Present. Not trying to impress. Not trying to control every outcome. And everything flows differently. The difference isn't intelligence. It isn't skill. It's their relationship to the outcome. One is gripping. The other is allowing. And that changes everything. Because the moment you stop trying to control how everything unfolds, you create space for things to unfold naturally. And that's where real connection begins. That's where clarity returns. That's where progress starts to feel real again. This is what detachment actually means. Not indifference. Not apathy. But freedom. Freedom from tying your inner stability to external outcomes. You still want things. You still pursue goals. But you don't depend on them for your sense of peace. And that changes everything. Because wanting creates space. But needing creates pressure. And pressure is what blocks the very thing you're trying to reach. So instead of chasing, you start aligning. Instead of forcing, you start allowing. Instead of reacting, you start choosing. And slowly, without a dramatic moment, everything begins to shift. You feel lighter. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped carrying what was never yours. You feel clearer. Not because you figured everything out, but because your mind is no longer clouded by constant control. You feel steadier. Not because outcomes are guaranteed, but because your foundation no longer depends on them. And from that place, progress becomes something entirely different. Not rushed. Not forced. But steady. Real. Sustainable. Because in the end, nothing truly meant for you requires you to chase it with desperation. What's meant for you requires clarity, patience, and the strength to stay grounded while everything unfolds. And the moment you stop fighting life, you stop exhausting yourself. And that's when things begin to move. Not because you forced them, but because you finally got out of the way.